Good morning. It's 9 a.m. Joe Kelly, Chair of the LACERA Audit Committee. Ms. Gonzalez, do you have some statements for us this morning?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kelly. This meeting is being conducted as a virtual meeting, so I will do a roll call of all the trustees to confirm attendance. From the Audit Committee, we have Mr. Bernstein,
I'm here.
Ms. Gray, Mr. Knox,
Morning, I'm here.
Mr. Oakham, Ms. Sanchez, Mr. Kehoe,
Present.
Mr. Kelly.
Present.
From the Board of Retirement, Mr. Moore, Mr. Robbins. From the Board of Investments, Mr. Green, Ms. Greenwood, Mr. Jones.
Present.
Staff participating in the meeting include CEO Santos Craigman, Deputy CEO Louis Lugo, AEO JJ Popowich, Chief Legal Counsel Steve Rice. Internal audit staff include Richard Bendel, Leisha Collins, Christina Logan, Catherine Tunn, Nathan Amick, George Lundy, and Gabriel Tafoya. Quality Assurance Division Managers, Bernie Buenaflor, Benefits Division Manager, Carlos Barrios, Member Services Division Manager, Alan Cochran. Staff include Louis Gittens and Kevin Hawkins. Consultants include Jenny Krengold and Don Willington, and Audit Committee Consultant, Robert Griffin. Trustees, if you would like to be placed on the queue, please use the Zoom chat option. At this time, we ask that all meeting participants to mute their mics until you are ready to speak. And now we may proceed with the agenda. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you very much, Mr. Gonzalez. Good morning, everyone. Our second item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the regular Audit Committee meeting of June 24, 2021.
So moved, Bernstein.
Is there a second?
It's Keith, I'll second.
Thank you very much. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, Ms. Gonzalez, will you take a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Mr. Bernstein,
Aye.
Ms. Gray's not available. Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez, and Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
The minutes are approved.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is public comment, and we have received no requests for public comment this morning. Item 4 on the agenda, excuse me, non-consent items. The recommendation is submitted by our Chief Audit Executive, Mr. Bendel, that the Audit Committee approve the revised internal audit charter. Mr. Bendel?
Sorry. Yeah, this is this. I believe Christina's going to take this one. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Kelly and Audit Committee members. After the Audit Committee and both boards approved the April 2021 Audit Committee Charter, Internal Audit did our review of our own divisional charter to ensure that it remained aligned with the IIA's model charter, LACERA, and then the Audit Committee Charter. There have not been any recent changes to the IIA's model charter, but there were relevant changes made to the April Audit Committee Charter. Those changes related primarily to the approval of Internal Audit's fiscal year end budget and the contingency fund. Based on the Audit Committee and the board's decision to adopt those revisions, staff has made the same revisions to our own Internal Audit Charter. The Chief Executive Office has reviewed and approved those changes, and we are now seeking the committee's approval. Are there any questions?
Okay, no questions. I will entertain a motion.
Keith, I'll move.
Thank you, Mr. Knox.
Kehoe, I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Kehoe. Ms. Gonzalez, any discussion? No, there were no questions. Ms. Gonzalez, roll call vote, please.
Okay, Mr. Bernstein,
Aye.
Ms. Gray,
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez, Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Welcome to Ms. Gray. Next item on the agenda, item 5A, Internal Audit Annual Performance Report. Mr. Bendel, are you taking this one?
This one is me, yes. Good morning, Mr. Chair and trustees on the audit committee. This essentially is our report card, self-assessment report card on the performance of the Division of Internal Audit for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2021. As you recall, we did bring to your committee the audit plan in June for the new fiscal year 21-22, and now we're bringing you a recap now that the year is completed through June 30th, 2021 for the year. So I know you've all had a chance to take a look at this, so I'll move through this rather quickly, but stop me if you have any questions along the way.
Mr. Bendel, just to confirm, there was a corrected version of this populated into Board Vantage. There was a slide update, so everyone should be referring to the corrected version.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the executive summary here, we really are, it talks about the fact that this was a very transformative year. We took advantage of the year in our quality assurance improvement program, focusing on 4 significant areas: the audit report format, audit work paper process, the risk assessment process, and the recommendation follow-up process. And I think you've seen all the work that we've done in this regard. This was supplemented by the update of our audit software to Teammate Plus, and a lot of effort was put into that. Some other notable accomplishments during the year are indicated below. And I think I would highlight the SOC 1, working with Plant Moran to perform our first SOC 1 of the OPEB reporting, and also, the acquisition at LACERA of a Chief Information Security Officer, and us working with that Chief Information Security Officer, and prior to his arrival, also assisting in the development of the InfoSec, contributing on a consulting basis to the InfoSec user manual. I think this all helps to just contribute to the framework of controls within the organization. I think that's really important. Moving on to the next slide, if there's no questions. This is the status of our audit plan at the end of the year. And you can see that there's a number of completed projects, and some in progress, and some that were postponed either to the next year or beyond. I think most notable here is the completion of 81% of our audit plan, and you can see the 64% completed, 19% rollover, 17% in progress at year end. And really what's important to note here is the coverage that we have throughout the organization. It's important that we'll be talking about this a little more in one of the following slides. The focus on the different risk areas within the organization, and I really like the way this pie chart is very balanced. So focus on all the key areas within the organization as reflected by the percentages on that chart. And the 9% unplanned is always something that we have a contingency for. There's always things that come up during the year that we have to focus that we didn't anticipate when we brought the audit plan to your committee at the beginning of the year. So that's the 9% unplanned. And as I mentioned, these are the hotspot areas, the risk areas in the organization that we want to make sure we're touching on. We can't do an audit in every area every year, but we want to touch on these significant areas of risk: the member processes, member benefits, IT security, and member data security, investments, organizationally, looking at issues that are important to the organization as a whole. Fraud and ethics, and then looking inward ourselves at internal audit, and ensuring that we shore up our processes and improve ourselves too. So again, here's some of the more significant projects. There's the different audits that we did during the year that reflects the death legal audit, the credit card, the quality assurance operations, the LA County hired retirees, the real estate issue, and there's I think there's additional ones in progress right now I know there's additional ones in progress. I won't go into any of the other. I think what's important to note here is the RFP audit pool that your committee approved at the last meeting. We are in the process of developing bid memos to go out in a number of different audit areas that we'll be bringing to your committee for approval once we select the auditors from the pool to perform those audits. I think it's anywhere between 2 to 4 audits will be brought forward to your committee at the October meeting to get those. And we have those contracts completed. We'll be meeting with the firms to just have an introductory meeting with the firms and further understand and have an in-person meeting to understand the depth of their skills in all the different areas so that we can bid the jobs out appropriately.
Okay. Richard, I have a question on this page 6 versus page 5. Can you go back to page 5? Under investments here, you wrote established investment audit pool. Is that the same as the generic audit pool for all of your audits, or was there a specialty that you bid out for investments?
So in the audit pool that we created, I think there were 7 firms in all that we hired. Not all 7 firms have investment specialty. I think I'm not sure the exact number. It's probably 4 or 5, I think, that have investment specialty. So there is an investment pool within that pool. There's an IT pool within that, and then there's a general audit pool. So the firms intersect with the different strengths, and so that is what the investment pool relates to.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
One quick question, Richard, if I may.
Oh, sure.
One of the things that was highlighted in the internal audit, the audit of the RECO follow-up, was a question of document retention. And I thought it was something that we should probably look at across the organization. Do we have that highlighted anywhere in the audit plan kind of going forward?
I don't know if anybody else on the team recalls if we have that in our current. It's certainly something we're considering. It's within our risk assessment. I just don't recall if we have it. It's something that we considered within internal audit. We took a look at our document retention. We considered it's something that we've done, but I think organizationally it's important. I know that we've talked about it in recent days in risk assessments that we've done. I just don't recall if I don't believe it's on our current.
I think it's kind of key to being able to perform audits is to have the documents in order to do the audits with. And so I wonder if it's something that should be highlighted at some point, have its a line item as a special audit. I don't know if other committee members feel the same way, but that's certainly something that I felt taking away from that RECO audit, the RECO follow-up.
Yeah, I think Ms. Sanchez brings up an excellent point. One other way to address it until we revise the audit program so it becomes its own line item is to incorporate it as an audit step in each one of your audits, both that you do and the contract auditing firms do, which is to assess the document retention practices of that particular unit or operation that you're doing. And then we can add it as a line item, a formal line item.
That's a good idea, definitely. We will do that.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez, for that idea.
Well, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Richard.
This is the key administrative project. So not only did we work on audits and all the other projects, but these did we? Oh, okay. And again, some of these things we've talked about already: the QAIP, the KPMG RECO follow-up audit. We have a new audit committee consultant that we engaged. I believe Mr. Griffin began at the beginning of this year, or we have the RECO follow-up process that we're enhancing, not only our general RECO follow-up process, but the IT RECO follow-up process, the annual risk assessment and audit planning process. We've made significant improvements to that process and continuing to develop that. Teammate optimization, the utilization of our teammate system, and with the transition to the Teammate Plus, it's a tremendously robust system, and we're continuing to just make sure we continue to take full advantage of that. You're all aware of the audit committee charter changes that were made over the last 2 years, and then based on those changes, we developed that audit committee calendar, which was designed to ensure that we're supporting the audit committee in all of the areas that the audit committee has responsibility, and that calendar, which we'll talk about a little later, reflects the different areas that the committee has responsibility in and which meetings we will bring each item on the calendar to the committee for. So moving on to the, if there's no questions, next is the other value-added activities. And, you know, this just reflects that there's many assurance projects, or not assurance, but advisory projects and time that staff spend working with different parts of the organization that doesn't get reflected in reports that come to the audit committee and doesn't get reflected. But it's definitely important, and it's how we contribute to the controls system of controls in the organization. And you know, we work very closely with the executive office, systems, the legal office, QA, and really every division in providing these services. So this just reflects our self QAIP, quality assurance and improvement program, that we do on an annual basis. We generally conform in all areas, and that's important that we manage the quality of our operation. We do an external quality assessment. It's we called it a QAR in the past, a quality assurance review. It's now called a external quality assessment, but it's the same thing. We do it every 5 years, and we will be bringing the audit. We're in the process of an RFP to select the auditor to perform that external quality assurance assessment, and we'll be bringing them to your committee at the October meeting, and we look forward to that beginning prior to the end of the year. This is a graphic representation of our goals, our internal audit goals, the division goals. Goal number one, of course, is to develop and execute an optimal audit plan. We didn't complete 100% of the audit plan, but we scored ourselves as 100 as meeting the marks in these areas. It doesn't mean that we can't improve on these marks, but we believe we met all of the marks that we wanted to achieve. So we scored ourselves 100 in this area. You know, number one really is the division goal under the performance measures. How did we as a division do? Number two is staff. Is staff dedicated at least at a 70% level to the audit and consulting services, which is our key responsibility, our key charge to perform. And then the last one is the quality of our work. Are we in compliance with the internal audit standards? And so we gave ourselves 100 in that area. Goal number two is facilitating audit committee governance. I talked a little bit about that a moment ago, the audit committee charter and the things that we're doing in that regard. You know, we scored ourselves a 75, and as there are additional things that we will continue to work on, we're going to be surveying the audit committee. That's, you know, we have a survey now that goes out to our stakeholders, the auditees, after we complete audits, to get feedback on that. And there's a slide coming up on that, but we'll also be surveying the audit committee to see how, you know, to get your assessment on how we're doing. And we hope to improve this KPI score. Goal number three is to continue improving internal audits processes. I've talked a lot about that already. So we think we're doing pretty good. We have an 83 in that area. We have work to continue doing, and we will continue doing that. The KPIs that are developed here, we're going to be operationalizing them, meaning that we'll push that down into the, you know, developing staff, providing training for the division, continuing to improve. I think that is, you know, we'll be doing that going forward. Goal number four, ensuring the continued competence and expertise of internal audit. And, you know, this not only speaks to hiring, but also to training of staff and continuing to assess our development in this area. You know, I think that self-assessment by staff is the one area that we need to, we scored ourselves a little lower in that area, but we want to work towards really providing staff an opportunity to develop and be trained. And I think this is important for succession planning as well. Moving on then, if there's no questions. This is the audit survey, just a sample. This is actually a summary, an average of the audit surveys that we've issued in the year. Yeah, one score would be disagree, that management or the auditees disagree that we, for example, management's input was considered in the planning process. A neutral is, no opinion, and a 3 would be they agree. So the average score we have there is 2. In most areas, it's a 3. In any areas that we're scored lower, whether it's the individual auditee, we want to look at improving in that area, and the areas that we have an average of lower than a 3, we want to focus on how we can drive those scores up. But we look for honest feedback, and this is a useful tool for us in developing and improving our quality.
I think you have to be, Rich, I think you have to be careful here that you are, that you're not striving to get a better score from the business unit you're auditing. So for example, under understanding planning the audit, there's a line item, the timing of the audit was appropriate. You likely will hear from the business unit that they never have time for you, internal audit. So they might rate you, negatively in that area, but it's almost in my mind an inappropriate question. So I appreciate that you want to get to more structural or administrative aspects of your relationship with the business unit. I just think you have to be careful that that you're not changing or aligning your behavior to get a better score. There was on another document, I think there was an objective of achieving a score of 80% or higher or something like that. And I think that's where you have to be a little careful. That a business unit may not score you well in some of these areas. That doesn't mean that you didn't plan appropriately, that you didn't know what you were doing, and that you didn't engage with the business unit. So I just would caution on this one. And we have to be careful too in how we interpret the results. But this can be a little tricky in terms of surveying your audit clients.
Yeah, I certainly agree that we have to be careful. I think in this case, it really is focused on, we try to be sensitive to all else being equal as far as risk goes. We are sensitive to the business cycles of the divisions, and this also maybe relates to the time that it took to complete the audit. If we said going in, we're going to spend this 2 months on field work, and it took us 6 months, or before we. So I think that's something we need to look at: is are we when we go into the entrance meeting, are we hitting those marks? And that's one of those areas of the KPI that we need to operationalize and develop metrics and try to stick to those. Communication is key. And I think if we dig into why we got a lower score in this area, it probably relates more to that, the timing of the completion, communication with the division manager, and those sort of things. But I do hear you. We definitely don't want to be steered away from an area of risk because, they're concerned about timing. But we have to be sometimes sensitive to that as well.
Yeah, I just want to back Joe up on that comment. We do, obviously, I think we strive to want to feel like the efforts that we're making are useful and productive to the organization, but sometimes they're inconvenient and painful, but that doesn't make them less useful or productive. So it's a fine line that we all want you to strive. We don't want you to upset the whole organization, but nor do we want you to necessarily be in lockstep and agreement either. So to some degree, a 2 is almost better than a 1 or a 3 in some cases.
Absolutely.
I have a question as well. So when we survey the different divisions after the audit, is it tied into a specific employee? Does the manager answer it? Can it come back to those individuals, or is there a little bit of anonymous element of it when it's being completed?
It generally goes to the division manager of the area that's being, that was audited. But, we look for them to, and I think in the email that we send out, we look for them to survey their own staff and provide us with a thoughtful score based on, the team, how the team felt we did. But ultimately, it is coming from the division manager.
Okay. Maybe something to look at on allowing some layers of protection for that for that division manager to be able to speak, but without any concerns of, coming back on them for saying something. I agree with Mr. Kelly that at the end of the day, we have to analyze everything, and sometimes an inconvenient audit is a good one. But we should also let the division be able to speak truthfully about their opinions on the audit itself, and then and not have concerns about coming after them or anything like that. So I'll just throw that out there as something to look at as you look at the internal survey.
Absolutely. Thank you. No, take that into consideration. And again, I said the division manager, but in certain areas, it's if it was a specific unit of larger divisions, we are, it's more the unit that is providing the reply, I guess. In the investment office, for example, you'd have the section, it may be a specific asset class that it's not necessarily always just the division manager.
Yeah, I think you do want the division manager to even review those responses, even if the division manager herself or himself does not complete the document. I think you also might want to, following up on Mr. Keogh's point, you might want to allow a division manager to engage with you in a conversation after the results are completed. So that's the kind of safe space, if you will, where I think some of the points Mr. Keogh's speaking about, where the division manager can get to those.
No, absolutely. Thank you. And we definitely want honest and constructive feedback. Thank you. That's good points. This just reflects the certifications in the office. There's more certifications on that wheel than we have staff, but that's because a number of staff have more than one certification. But it reflects the 5 CPAs, 3 internal auditors, 2 CISAs, Certified Information System Auditors, and 2 fraud examiners. So everybody in the office, all of the professional staff have at least one professional certification. And then the chart to the right reflects the CPE for the entire division by category. It's pretty balanced. You can see that except for the right column, which was the teammate, the new teammate software, we had a very dedicated entire division training that went in. Certain staff worked as the experts, and did some preliminary training, and then the entire group got training in the teammate product. So a huge emphasis in that area this year. But we will be continuing to do both full office training. I think it's important that everybody gets training in something. We have one coming up on IT auditing. It's a pretty basic, but it's for all staff. I think it's important that sometimes the entire group gets trained at the same time, because then you have the ability to discuss, and you've got that perspective that you all get. And then we also have the individual staff continuing development plans and training plans that are developed. So that is that slide. I guess that's it. So any further questions?
Richard, I have one additional question. I was surprised that there was no commentary regarding the impact of COVID to your operations this past year. I mean, this is a performance report. Did you feel COVID impacted your abilities to engage with your staff negatively? I mean, there was no mention of COVID. Can you speak briefly to operating in a COVID world in internal audit?
Yeah, I guess you're right. And maybe that just reflects how comfortable we've got in operations. We didn't feel like there was, I mean, certainly I know there's impact to the organization, but to our staff, I think kudos to the executive team, the systems group. We found that the tools that we were provided were very effective in allowing us to work. It really became a non-issue for us, and as related to our audit process, it provided for really great ability for us to focus on our quality improvement and development. But it didn't really provide any sort of hindrance to our completion of audit work. I think, as we go back into the office eventually, and once the meetings are occurring around the round table, we want to be there. We'll be there. We'll need to be there. we couldn't continue to work off-site. But while the organization is working remotely, we've found it to be very effective. And in managing our business partners as well, the actuarial auditors, the external financial auditors, and other vendors. I guess it just was such to our operations. I don't mean to at all minimize COVID's impact, but it was a non-issue to us.
Okay, thank you very much. And I apologize, I had Mr. Knox in the queue. Mr. Knox.
No problem. You actually asked the same question I was going to ask because I thought it was a little odd that telework didn't come up once. Going back to slide 4, I like those pie charts that you included as well. I guess I'm used to seeing some sort of year-over-year comparison, and that's why I started thinking about the impact of telework, because I don't see in here, what the completed and rolled over and in progress were, fiscal 2020 compared to 2021. And then on the pie chart on the right, it would have been interesting for me to see maybe another version of the chart on the right where, it shows of those categories, how much of that was completed. So for investments, what portion of that 19% was completed versus rolled over versus in progress. So just curious on one point and then a suggestion for the future on the other.
Well, thank you. We'll take that into consideration for sure. I think those are good ideas.
Thank you. Ms. Sanchez?
So I actually, having gone through the work with the staff during the internal audit of Audit during COVID, I would say that your group is a naturally introverted group. So I don't know if everybody just suddenly felt more comfortable doing their job. So, but I would, from my perspective, I would say that the team was working all cylinders firing. So it was really refreshing to see that through such a hard and difficult time. The question I had, Richard, was the pie chart on the left. Keith almost asked the question I was going to ask, but not quite. So I'm going to ask it. How does this compare to the last, say, 3 years on average? Because one of the things that we were trying to do was improve the amount, this sort of ensure that the audit plan was doable and that you could accomplish most of it. How would you, I have a feeling, but I want to hear kind of in numbers how that compares to sort of a trend, if you will, of how much of the audit plan tended to be completed versus rolled over.
I don't know if your sense was that it's been a pretty flat trend, but that's what it was. I'd say, I don't have the numbers in front of me on an average, but I would say this is pretty similar to an average of the last 3 years. It's been a pretty steady. I think, as I mentioned, the focus this year was very much on developing the different elements of the risk assessment, the audit work papers, the audit reporting, and developing those KPIs. But we certainly are going to be focusing more on the metrics and trying to drive an increase in that trend line towards completion of projects. And there's a number of reasons why projects are rolled over. It's not just because we didn't get to them or we weren't effective or efficient. Sometimes it's because of organizational issues. There's changes happening within they're bringing in a new system, so it doesn't make sense at this time to audit it, or there's other issues going on. Some of it's because there were unplanned projects that took priority. So it's not just because of the, so we're always going to have some element of audits in progress at the end of the year, and those rolled over. But I would like to see those two slices of the pie get smaller and the completed projects get a little bigger.
Yeah, no, I agree. I recognize and have experienced those unplanned audits, et cetera. But I would actually say that the capacity building in combination with keeping the trend line flat is almost a win. In that I do think that you've laid the groundwork for sort of future efficiency. So yeah, hope to see that come to fruition in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I would agree with Ms. Sanchez. I'm interested in seeing the benefit of Teammate Plus, because I think that's a really big deal. I think that leads to a lot of efficiencies in how you conduct your audits, and also leveraging the audit pool. You don't have to do all these audits yourself. And so I'm interested to kind of just give a particular focus to that over the next year to see if we're able to clear more of the planned audits than we have. And I think you're probably right, Richard. I think 2/3 completed is probably a good guesstimate for recent years. Okay, I don't have anyone else in the queue.
Just one more point, Mr. Kelly, if I
Yes.
could. Yeah, and Ms. Sanchez said it very well. And I think last year at this time, what I was trying to wrap my head around was, this notion of are we biting off more than we can chew? And that's why, yes, it would be helpful to see that over time, what we're engaging. So as a member of the audit committee, I understand the picture better over time of, yes, this is typical. We do have a lot of unplanned, rather than just, wow, are we not efficient enough? Why is it only we're doing 2/3? That would help me better understand and be a better member of the audit committee.
That's
Not
good
just
feedback. We'll-
here, yeah, this is kind
Sure.
of typical.
Yep,
You're
we'll
an
add
excellent
that
member
trend
right
in
now, Mr. Knox. Okay, anything else, Richard, on this one?
Nothing else unless there's any more
Have
questions.
any other comments in the queue? Thank you very much for this report, Mr. Bendel. Let's go on to 5B, fiscal year end 2022 internal audit goals.
Okay. Good morning, Chair Kelly and trustees of the Audit Committee. So internal audit has developed some goals for fiscal year 2022. They're included in attachment A to the memo for this agenda item. And we've also included our performance measurements so the Audit Committee can see how we plan to go about completing these goals and also have a way to measure our accomplishments. So the goals are in 3 areas, and you'll note that they're pretty similar to the goals that we have had in the past. However, for fiscal year 2022, we did add some additional performance indicators. And as I'm going through each of the goals, I'll highlight on those newly added performance measurements. So for goal number 1, which is typical for our internal audit department, is to develop and execute a risk-based annual audit plan. And here we have, again, our performance measurement, completion of at least 80% or more of our audit plan. And that's a completion. I think when we were going through the prior year, fiscal year 2021, and we had that chart, we showed how we're at about 64% of completed, and we have about another 19% that is in progress. We really want to hit that mark of completing 80% of our audit plan. So it's included as one of our performance measurements. Something new that we added is our semi-annual risk assessment. Now you'll note that in the past, we usually have an annual risk assessment. We use that for our audit planning. We're planning to have another risk assessment completed towards December time period. This has a benefit of two different ways. First of all, it allows us to do another assessment of the risk within the organization. It allows us to then look at our audit plan and see if we need to make any revisions, but also it will give us a more current assessment that we can use when we're doing our audit planning for fiscal year 2023. Because for next fiscal year, and you may recall that prior discussions, we weren't able to bring our budget along with our audit plan. So we're going to have our audit plan provided to the audit committee in February, along with our budget. So by having the risk assessment in December, we'll be able to plan that a little bit more efficiently. We've also included how we strive to always allocate most of our staff hours towards direct assurance, consulting, and advisory services. And that last performance measurement, the 75% of the recommendations are implemented within the prescribed implementation timeline. We've really been working on getting those recommendations updated and following up with the managers to make sure that they're being implemented. So we have included this as another performance indicator on our side so that we are on top of those recommendations and able to report those out to the audit committee.
I had a comment on that one. I think that's not appropriate for audit because the way it's written, it's regarding implementation, and you're not responsible for implementation. You are responsible for a follow-up and engaging with the business unit on status, but that's very different than how it's written. Mm-hmm. This goal, as it's written in my mind, belongs to Mr. Santos. Santos Kreiman, the CEO. It doesn't belong to audit regarding implementation.
Okay.
of the recommendation. So I would just ask you to think that one, think about that one again.
Okay, that's one we can look at revising. I'll move on to goal number 2, unless there's any other questions. Okay, so goal number 2 is to continue to improve internal audit's presence and value with stakeholders. We had a lot of discussion when Richard was going through our performance of fiscal year 2021 regarding the surveys. Now, we use the surveys to gauge how we're doing. And a lot of times we get very good feedback, and it's a way that we can make adjustments or we can learn from in order to improve our audit as we're doing them. So we do have the surveys. We also will have a survey that we'll provide to the audit committee because we would like to get your feedback as well, and the executive office. So we're going to do that on an annual basis going forward. We will, something new that we're planning to do is to provide some training to our management team at LACERA. And this training will include educational piece on internal audit's role at LACERA, but also the management's role in our control environment at LACERA. And we will also continue to have that educational piece that we provide to the audit committee on an ongoing basis. Our goal is to do that at least 3 times per year.
What is MACSAC?
That's the management team, the senior management team, and SAC is the supervisory management team. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to goal number 3. This is really where we're looking at how we can enhance internal audit divisions, competence, and efficiencies. We have our external quality assessment coming up. It'll be done towards the end of the year. We would like to get the of course, we always strive to get the highest rating, which is generally conforms. So that's a rollover from fiscal year 21 because we weren't able to do it last fiscal year. But we're in the process of going through the RFP process to find a consultant so we can have it done this year. We also would like all of our staff to complete 100% of their annual training plan. An important note here is that we are having all of our staff do sort of a self-assessment so we can identify where there's a gap as far as where they are right now and where they should be. And we'll use that as a way of identifying the training that will be needed for our staff. And lastly is that 100% of our internal audit projects are documented in Teammate. As we've been discussing, we have our upgraded Teammate tool. We really want to be able to provide those KPIs, not only for us when we're looking at how we're progressing when we're doing audits, how we're tracking our recommendations, but we want to be able to have some good reporting tools that we can use as well. And we'll provide that to the audit committee. So on an ongoing basis or a periodic basis, we will provide updates to the audit committee on our progress that we're making with our goals. So with that, I'll pause and see if there are any questions or comments that we can address.
Thank you very much. I have Mr. Griffin in the queue. Good morning, sir.
Morning. That was quite an engaging conversation that you had on the performance the past year. And I'm going to try not to be redundant, but there's several comments I'd like to share. And I think with the execution of the full audit plan, and we're talking about the number of projects that carry over, when you're talking about the pie charts, the coming pie charts, whether they're comparative or not, it would be interesting to see how much of the audit work actually gets completed by the audit pool versus the audit staff. And I think the thing with the bringing an audit pool in here is a good strategy that should enable internal audit to reduce the number of in process or uncompleted or postponed audits, at least those related to staffing. So that's one comment. The second comment has to do with the survey. And the survey brought some very interesting comments, and I think timing, bringing an internal audit, having an internal audit is a little bit like booking a convenient dental appointment. And I say that with all due respect to internal audit here, because it's a top-notch shop. But I think what you learn to do over the course of the years, scheduling becomes more of an art, because you do need to understand the ebb and flow of operations so that you don't go into the disbursements or the benefits department whenever they do their big benefit rollovers and changes and just create havoc. So, I mean, while you don't let them fully dictate timing, you do have to understand the operational cycles so that you can come up with something that's not totally disruptive. And perhaps, when benefit payments are late, they're pointing at some poor unsuspecting auditor. And the second thing on that, management input was, and I don't think anybody commented on management input, which was a 2. And that's another area that you have to be very circumspect about, because management may be providing input so that you don't go where the real risks are. So when you listen, you need to listen and understand the challenges and the issues. They may either be putting a red herring out there, or it may really be it may need to be an area. So we need to have good listeners, and we need to have some sort of discernment about, well, are these guys just trying to get me to stalling me or pushing me over in some other direction? So it's interesting. The survey results, and certainly it's worth the time. And the third thing, but I think, and this one I do think is good, there was a 2 on keeping management informed. And I think one of the things that everyone needs to communicate better, and I think during the course of an audit, management, the division managers or whoever's the responsible parties are going to have concerns, or they're going to want to know. And I don't know that it's necessarily fair to them, unless this is some sort of a high level fraud audit or very sensitive audit, to know how things are going. Are we on schedule? Are things working? So, you need to have that communications during the course of an audit. And I think that's just as much as possible a courtesy. So those were things on that survey that I think, that you can't necessarily stand on absolutes. And I'm glad to see on with the teammate, there is a significant investment in teammate. And I think it really, we need to get the return on that investment during this coming year. So I think the plan's a reasonably good plan. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. We appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Griffin. Those are excellent comments. I agree with everything 100%.
Okay, Mr. Brendel, items 5C, D, and E.
So items 5C is the status of external audits not conducted at the discretion of internal audit and or the audit committee. And those are those audits that might be performed by external regulators. It could be people coming in from a plan sponsor, or it could be a software license auditor that comes in checking on software licensing in the IT area. I survey the management team, and I'm not been made aware of any audits being conducted currently, not at the discretion of internal audit or the audit committee.
Okay, thank you.
Item D is our internal audit staffing report. There is, we are still down 2 positions. We did have a principal promotion during the year. We're currently running a senior promotion that is not complete, so I will not talk further about that. But we have 2 open positions, and one of them is, we have 1 open position, and then we have a staff person that is loaned out sumivong to the systems division. So we need to make a determination as to what we're going to do in that regard. And I'm working with the executive office and HR on that issue, but we hope to hire at least 1 more person, and hopefully 2 within the next 6 months or so. That's all I have on staffing.
Okay. Do you have any comments on E, F, or G?
Not unless there's any questions. We're happy to take questions in each of those areas.
Okay, committee members, any questions on items 5, E, F, or G, ethics, hotline report, audit plan status report, or annual committee calendar? I don't have any comments. Okay, let's move to agenda item 6. Mr. Griffin, any additional comments?
I just have one comment. During the last meeting, I was engaged in a conversation, and it came to my attention that some of my responses to questions as part of a discussion may have been taken as that I was providing assurance in a professional matter. And as the audit committee consultant, my role here really is advice and counsel on things like internal audit, best practices, trends, regulatory, coming regulatory issues, and the audit plan. And it was not my, during that conversation, I did not have the facts and circumstances and did not intend to provide any assurance to on the adequacy of the controls in question. So I will, I like this job. It's very engaging on an intellectual basis. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. We appreciate it.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, Mr. Keel?
Yeah. So it's concerning to me to hear that there's any negative pushback being placed onto our consultant. And this seems to be an ongoing cultural issue at LACERA where people who challenge sometimes be taken as negative rather than trying to be constructive. And it's concerning to me when I hear that comment from our consultant. So I think we should do everything in our power to make it so that our consultant doesn't have to think about being able to keep his job or not by speaking exactly what is on his mind. So from me as a committee member, I want to relay to him that he has the ability and support to be able to say whatever he wants, however he wants, when it comes to him doing his job.
Thank you, Mr. Keel. Any other comments?
Mr. Kelly, I totally agree with Mr. Kehoe. What I have liked in our past meetings is the commentary and the commentary that Mr. Griffin has made, be it positive or negative. It's extremely constructive. And Mr. Griffin, I want you to feel 100% comfortable in saying to us, hey, you screwed up, or you need to do X, Y, and Z. That's what we're here for. And I totally appreciate the comments that you made. I want you to, once again, as Mr. Kehoe has said, feel very comfortable about doing what you have to do. We don't bite. So I thank you very much.
I agree as well.
And I appreciate you.
I wasn't at the last meeting, so I'm curious as to what it was. But
I'm actually curious
I agree
myself.
with the other committee members. I want
I
to hear
appreciate
the unvarnished truth so I can be a better committee member.
You know, if I can bring a moment of clarity, and I didn't want to make too big a deal out of it, it had to do with a circumstance and a set of hypothetical, a potential or a hypothetical defalcation or fraud, and a set of controls, and what would constitute an adequate defense against a fraud or a theft or an error. And as most, auditors, I was like, well, I was hesitant because I didn't know all the facts and circumstances. And I would compare this much to a party, and you're talking to a cardiologist telling him about, I have a funny heartbeat. What do you think it is? Or you think I'm okay? And, if you don't know, and just at a professional level, you really don't want to say something off the top of your head. And certainly, I was trying to understand, and I was trying not to render an opinion. And so that was it. I was talking about belt and suspenders. It was a very hypothetical circumstance. And I think the thing that I don't know what's in each person's mind, but certainly I'm not here to provide a false sense of security. And I think that's the thing. I'm here willing to discuss a lot of things, and but you know, it was just trying to portray that it was hypotheticals, and I wanted everybody to have it in the proper context.
Well, thank you for providing that clarification. We appreciate it. Ms. Gonzalez, next item, items for staff review. I don't think there are any items for staff review.
My apologies. There is no items for staff review.
Okay, thank you for confirming that. Next item, go to the order. Mr. Keogh.
I have nothing on my end.
Okay, Ms. Gray.
Just a big thank you to staff and Mr. Bendel for all the hard work you do. But I'm glad that you take our constructive criticism, our comments and suggestions. I like your response, so I'll take that into consideration. I'm sure I know what you mean by that. You're going to do it, because a lot of times when we have made certain suggestions, the next meeting or the next, follow-up report, what I see is exactly what we suggested. So I appreciate that. Thank you, and thank you to staff.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Mr. Bernstein?
Thank you for a good meeting, Chair Kelly. I've got no comments.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. Mr. Knox?
Nothing. Good morning, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Knox. Ms. Sanchez?
Nope, thanks.
Okay, we will now move into executive session. Ms. Gonzalez, if you can remove those folks who will not attend executive session, let us know when that's done.
Will do.